right, what's up, Econ fam? Welcome to 1 Minute Econ. Today we're going to be having a look at an IGCSE Economics past paper, paper 2 from Feb March 2024, and it's paper variant 22. In this video, we're going to be having a look at section A. So I'm going to read through the source in section A, and then I will put also a time stamp below of the different questions. So if you want to have a look at specific questions, you can jump ahead and do that. All right, so let's get into it. Section A, read the source material carefully before answering question 1. Okay, source material, changes in the Danish economy. Denmark fact file, they're giving us GDP for 2021, the labor force in employment in 2020. So that's all the people who are employed and working. Total wages paid in 2020, the HDI value, so the Human Development Index, way of measuring living standards, and also the HDI ranking. Denmark is a high-income northern European country. The Danish population have high living standards and enjoy relatively long hours of leisure time. They spend this time in a variety of ways, including cycling, jogging, and playing golf. Danish workers are employed in a range of industries. Denmark used to be a leading shipbuilding country, but now the industry is in decline. Ships have substitutes in other forms of transport. Also, it may be possible to postpone the purchase of ships. They take a long time to produce and they are expensive to store. In contrast to the shipbuilding industry, the Danish toy industry has grown in recent years. Denmark's shipbuilding and toy industries are in the private sector. Denmark's economic performance is also influenced by changes in the public sector. Table 1.1 shows Danish government spending and GDP over the period 2015 to 2021. So they've given us a table here, 2015 to 2021. They've given us government spending in billions, and they've given us GDP in billions of dollars as well. Denmark is heavily involved in international trade. It usually has a surplus on the current account of its balance of payments. International trade affects the availability of products in the country and the country's foreign exchange rate. It also affects the country's GDP and level of employment. How people work in Denmark, as in most countries, has changed in recent years. More people now spend at least some of their working hours working from home. This change is expected to affect productivity and help firms keep their workers. Households may be encouraged to move out of cities and to buy larger homes. There may also be changes in demand for transport, demand for food sold in city centers, and firms' need for office space. All right. So I put the answers over here in a Google presentation, Google Slides, just so that it was easier for me to set it up. All right. So section A. The instructions are answer all questions in this section. So you need to answer question A all the way through to question H. You cannot choose in section A. All questions are mandatory. All right. First question 1A, just for 1 mark. Calculate the average wage paid in Denmark in 2020. So we need to get the average wage paid per person. So how would we do that? Well, we need to go and get the total wages paid in 2020, right? $252 billion. And we need to get all the people who are getting paid those wages. So all the people in employment, all the people who are working, getting paid, and that is 3 million people. So how to calculate it? Let's have a look. We've got total wages divided by number of employed people, which we saw was 252 billion divided by 3 million. Okay, so this is something I've seen quite a lot in recent papers, is they like to, it's the units. So now you've got to deal with billions and millions here, right? So billions has 9 zeros and millions has 6 zeros. So 252 billion divided by 3 million. So then there's what I'm going to do, just to make this a little bit easier for you to see, is I'm going to try and cancel out those zeros. So there's 6 zeros there, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, nice and simple. There you go. So that's going to reduce itself down to 252,000 divided by 3, and then we're going to get the average wage per person. And there you go. It is $84,000 per person. Okay, please don't forget the the unit of account here, dollars, $84,000 per person. All right, so there you go, nice and easy. Let's go to question 1b. Identify two possible opportunity costs of a Danish person using their leisure time to cycle. Okay, so opportunity cost is the value of the next best thing you could do. And if we had a look in the source, they said, Danish people spend their time in a variety of ways, including cycling, jogging, and playing golf. So if they're cycling, they could be spending the other choices they have is to spend their time jogging or playing golf, right? So there you go. So I said my answer was the opportunity cost of cycling is the fitness gains from jogging and the enjoyment of playing golf. So that should be 2 marks. I wanted to be safe, so I said added a little more, and that was a Danish person could choose to work and receive income instead of cycling. So we've put in more than enough information here to get the full 2 marks. All right, question C. So explain one way that living standards are measured in Denmark. 2 marks. So we're going to probably have to identify a knowledge point, a fact, and then explain it. Can you remember I pointed out when we were reading the source material, HDI, right? HDI is how we measure living standards in economics. So we've got HDI, and HDI stands for the Human Development Index. Okay, the Human Development Index. So we should get 1 point for saying Human Development Index, and now we've got to explain for that second point. So I'd say Human Development Index measures living standards because it is an index of health, education, and income. So health being average life expectancy, education, average years in schooling, and income, gross national income per person. There we've identified HDI and we've explained it. So we should have our 2 points. Let's go have a look at question D. Explain two reasons why the supply of ships is price inelastic. So we're going to have to put 4 points. So we're going to have to put 2 points, right? Two facts as to why they're inelastic. And then we're going to have to explain each of those points for another point each, a total of 4 points. So the first thing I did here was I explained what price inelastic supply means. We know price elasticity of supply means when the price changes, can the quantity supplied change? So if it's price inelastic, it means even though the price changes, the quantity supplied cannot change very quickly. It's not very responsive to the price changes. So naturally, if the price of ships went up in this case, a firm that produces ships would want to increase their quantity supplied so that they could make a profit. But for some reason, we know that the supply of ships is price inelastic. So they can't do that. They don't have the ability to increase the supply of ships when the price goes up. So firstly, I've explained price inelastic supply. It means that the quantity supplied doesn't change much even when the price changes. So if we're going back to the story, I remember they spoke about it. They said, here you go. So ships take a long time to produce. So if they take a long time to produce, then even if the price increases, the shipbuilding firms cannot increase the quantity supplied of ships very quick because they take a long time to produce. And the other thing is they're expensive to store. So if a firm wants to keep a supply of ships, a stock of ships, right? Their ships are huge, and the maintenance costs are very expensive, so it's expensive to store. So it's not really a profitable decision. We know that profit equals revenue minus cost. We want to keep costs low. So if we want to make a profit, we can't store ships, right? Because they're expensive. So we don't have much of a stock of ships. So when the price of ships goes up, of course, we want to supply more as a shipbuilding firm that wants to make a profit. And we know it's in the private sector, so of course they want to make a profit. We're just not going to be able to increase that supply of ships very quickly. So there's our 2 points. So the first point I've written down from the source was ships take a long time to produce, so therefore the supply cannot increase quickly. Even if the price of ships increases and ship makers could make a profit, they're just not able to because it takes too long to build. And the second reason was ships are expensive to store or keep. So this would increase the cost of ship producers, like I said, and they So they wouldn't want to keep a stock of ships, right? That means that when the price of ships increases, there aren't any ships available, so the supply cannot increase quickly enough. So there we should have our 4 points. I just went for a safety knowledge point here by explaining what pricing elastic supply means. All right, let's go on to question E. Analyze the relationship between government spending and GDP in Denmark for 4 points. So what we need to do here is we're going to have to go and have a look at the table they've given us of government spending and GDP, and we're going to have a look at the relationship between government spending and GDP. Is it positive? Is it negative? Is it random? And then we're going to have to try to explain what we understand about that relationship. So let's go have a look. In table 1.1, Danish government spending and GDP from 2015 to 2021. I'm going to go have a look at government spending. So I see over this time, okay, government spending pretty much increases. Okay, it only increases from 2015 to 2021. And when we look at GDP, it also increases all the way except for here between 2018 and 2019, it decreases. The other thing I notice is that GDP is always bigger than government spending. And this makes sense, right? Because government spending is one of the factors that makes up GDP, or one of the factors that affects GDP. Okay, so the first thing I said was generally government spending increased from $77 billion to $86 billion, and GDP increased from $303 to $372 billion over the period of 2015 to 2021. And there you can see it's a positive relationship. So GDP and government spending have a positive relationship because government spending increased all the way and GDP more or less increased also throughout that time period. Okay, and then I did note, except in 2019, where government spending increased from 80 to $82 billion, but GDP decreased from 356 to $350 billion. So I noted that just in case, just to show the examiner that I had a keen eye for the what was happening, the trends in the data. And government spending increase, I put in the percentages just in case for an extra point. Government spending increased by 11%, while GDP increased by 22%. Okay, and that also kind of shows, I said earlier, government spending is one of the causal factors of GDP, right? So it would make sense that government spending would maybe be less than the total GDP percentage increase, because there are other factors also affecting GDP. That's not only government spending. So how did I calculate that? Well, I went for government spending. You take the new minus old divided by old, right? That gives us the percentage change. So I went 86 minus 77 divided by 77 times 100. And I did the same for GDP, new minus old divided by old. So 372 billion minus 303 billion divided by 303 billion times by 100. That gave me the percentage change. And then so GDP, something else I pointed out earlier when we were having a look, GDP is always larger than government spending. Okay, and then this was sort of what I gained from my analysis of that table, was that government spending is some cause of GDP, but there are also other factors that affect GDP. So then we should have more than enough points there for 4. Okay. Analyze using a demand and supply diagram. Okay, ding, 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 alarm signs. That means we have to draw a demand and supply diagram. Okay, how an increase in birth rate would affect the market for toys. So we know the factors that affect demand. One is population. So if we have an increase in birth rate, we're going to have an increase in population, which is going to be an increase in demand. So I'm going to open a Google Jamboard here for you. Let's see. There you go. All right. So first thing we will have to do if we want a full score, I'll talk you through it. We need our axes. Okay, so we've got price. Sorry about the writing. Price, and we've got quantity, so price on the y-axis and quantity on the x-axis. I'm just going to leave it at quant for now. Okay, there you go. So that's already going to be a point there for price and quantity. Then I know my little hack is always S for sky. So that's supply and demand. There you go, D for down, demand. Okay, and then I'm going to go label my original market equilibrium. Okay, so then I'm going to call that P, and I'm going to call that Q. Okay, there you go. And what I might do is, just to make sure that the examiner knows where my starting point is, I might just go label all my original supply, demand, and equilibrium, price and quantity 1. So I've got, there you go. So I've got supply 1, demand 1. That's already 1 point. I've got my axes, price and quantity, 1 point. So I know that there's going to be an increase in population. So then there's going to be an increase in demand, right? So then my demand curve is going to shift to the right, showing an increase in demand. I'm going to call that D2. There you go. And then what you'll notice is, look at the new equilibrium point here, my new intersection of demand and supply. So I'm going to notice that price is going to increase. So my new equilibrium price is going to increase to P2. And then I might just draw an arrow like that, just to show that I know how price has changed. And I go, my new equilibrium point where demand and supply are equal, that's market equilibrium, right? And I'm going to go and find the new market equilibrium quantity, and I'll call that Q2. And I'm going to label that, I'm going to show an arrow increasing. Okay, there you go. So I'm going to snip that for you guys. There you go, capture. Okay, so analyze using a demand and supply diagram how an increase in the birth rate would affect the market for toys. So it's 5 marks. So I'm probably going to get 3 for my supply demand diagram. So I'm going to get 1 for correctly labeling the axes, 1 for correctly labeling the original supply and demand curve, and making sure they're sloping in the correct directions, and then another 1 for showing a correct increase in demand and what happens to market price and market equilibrium price and market equilibrium quantity. And then I'm going to have to, it says, it doesn't only say draw a diagram to show, it says I must analyze using a diagram. So I'm also going to quickly explain what happened here. I'm going to say when birth rate increases, birth rate increases, the population increases, so demand for toys increases because there are more children. So the price and quantity, so the equilibrium price and quantity will increase. Okay, and this makes sense because if demand increases, right, the quantity demanded is more than the current quantity supplied. So then we've got a shortage of toys. So naturally, toy producers will increase the price of toys so that the market clears, right? Alrighty, so then we should have our 5 points. All right, so the discuss questions. So remember, you can already see how I've set out my answer. Discuss questions always have to show an evaluation. So it's kind of like a debate, right? You have to debate the side for, or the advantages, and then you have to debate the side against. So the disadvantages might be one way of thinking about it. And by doing that, you are evaluating the situation. And that's what the examiner is looking for in a discuss question. So I've already set it out. My class always likes to show their shift in the evaluation from one side to the other by saying on the other hand. So that's something that's really resonated with them. So that's what I'm going with in how I'm structuring my question here. So discuss whether or not a surplus on the current account of its balance of payments would benefit the Danish economy. All right. So the first thing I've said here, I'm just shooting for a knowledge point, is current account record is a record of money in and money out, right? So remember the current account is um, a net exports, so difference in goods exported and imported, difference in exports, if you want to think of it like that, of services and imports of services. So money in and out from services, spent on money spent on services. Sorry, primary income and secondary income. Okay, so here we've got a current account surplus. So that means there's more money coming into the Danish economy than there is going out of the Danish economy, right? So that's what I've said. I've gone for another knowledge point. Surplus means more money in than money out. Okay, and now I'm going to try explain what that means for the Danish economy. This means firms are making profits, so supply should increase. When supply increases, employment should increase, right? Because to increase supply, companies need factors of production to produce the final product. So I maybe should put that the other way around, right? Firms make a profit, so they want to produce more, so they hire more workers, right? So supply can increase. When more people are working, more people have more disposable income, right? So demand increases. And then we know when supply and demand are increasing, GDP is increasing. And then HDI and living standards are also going to increase because more people have more money, more people have jobs, right? Government's probably making more revenue as well to spend on supply side policies. Then we're going to have, because GDP increases, economic growth, and because HDI is increasing, economic development, right? So we're going to have an increase in economic growth, increase in economic development, and an increase in standards of living. So I'm going to highlight that blue because that's the good stuff. Okay, this is the good stuff of having a current account surplus. So let's go see what are the potential bad things of having a current account surplus. So on the other hand, right, so that shows, okay, I'm shifting to the other side of the discussion here, the other side of the debate. If demand is increasing, we know we're going to have ding, 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 demand pull inflation, right? So if demand increases, if you think of your supply and demand diagram, price goes up. So inflation is increasing. That means the cost of goods are increasing. So living standards decreases here because people can buy less goods with their money because for that same amount of money, prices are more expensive. So they get less goods. So living standards are decreasing, and there might also be an increase in poverty, right? Because now relative poverty, people who could afford just a basic amount of good needs maybe can now not afford that same basket of basic needs. So then we're going to have an increase in poverty, relative poverty in this case, probably. All right. So then we also might have an increase in income inequality because prices are more expensive. That's a larger percentage of poor people's money than it is for richer people. Okay, on the other hand, for another point here, I'm going to say inflation. When we have inflation, firms' costs increase, so that means supply decreases, right? Because for that same amount of budget that a company or a firm has, they can now, if the cost of their inputs are more expensive, right? The cost of their resources that they use to produce their product is more expensive, then they can, for the same amount of budget, buy less materials or inputs, right? Less money to spend on factors of production. So then the supply is going to decrease. And we know when supply decreases, price also goes up. So we have more inflation, and then firms are probably going to have to cut costs, and we're going to have an increase. They're going to maybe release some workers, and then we're going to have an increase in unemployment. So these are the negative sides of the of having a current account surplus. Okay. So just to go back, discussion question, both sides of the argument. I've explained what is the current account, what is the current account surplus, and then I explained what are I analyzed that, right? I explained the positive effects of having a current account surplus. And then because it's a discussion question, I must evaluate the situation. I said, on the other hand, and then I spoke about the possible negative consequences of having a current account surplus. Okay. All right. So let's go have a look at the last question. Again, a discussion question. Discuss whether or not more people working from home will benefit an economy. Okay, so this one's a bit of a thinking question, right? We're going to have to think a little bit out the box here. It's a bit of a curveball. So again, the same as the last question, discussion question, 6 marks. If we want a shot at the full six, we're going to have to show an evaluation. So we're going to have to just debate the positive side, and then we're going to have to debate the benefits, the negative side of whether this of more people working home actually benefits the economy or not, right? So 6 marks. So we probably have to have 1 or 2 points on the good side and explain them, 1 or 2 points on the bad side, or the argument side, and explain those, and then we should have a shot at 6 points. So what I came up with here was, if people can work from home, they're going to be generally more motivated, right? If workers are more motivated, they can increase productivity, which means in theory more supply, which means more profit for firms. Firms can grow, we can employ more people, and GDP is going to increase when supply increases. So then the economy is going to benefit from that. I also said, so that was 1 point that I explained. I went for another point on the argument four side. There's going to be less commuting and traveling to work, which means less pollution, right? There's less pollution, then we're going to have an increase in standard of living, in living standards. Okay, because everyone benefits from that. So it has a positive externality. Okay, so then I've given 2 points here and I've explained them. And now I'm going to show that I'm shifting away from the for side of the debate to the against side of the debate. So I'm going to say again, show that transition. On the other hand, and let's go have a look at the points I made here. Said on the other hand, people are working at home, right? So they're not using local services. So the demand for local goods and local services that people would be using on their commute or on their lunch hour around the city is decreasing, right? So local demand is decreasing. That means local firms are going to lose profits. Unemployment might increase. So I should put that out there. We certainly know that GDP would decrease if there's a decrease in demand. We know that there's a decrease in quantity demanded. So quantity demand times price equals our GDP. So we're going to have a decrease in GDP. I'm also going to say here increase in unemployment. Alrighty. So let's see what else I said. Sorry. Let's fix that up real good. There you go. All right. Okay. The other point I made as well, if people are at home, they're not being monitored, right? And if people are not being monitored by a manager or a supervisor, then they may tend to get a little bit lazy, which may reduce productivity, which in theory reduces supply, right? Well, there's certainly inefficiencies here for the firm, so they're certainly not increasing their supply as they should be or as they want to. And we know when supply decreases, quantity of supply decreases, so we're going to have a decrease in GDP. And then I've made another point here. Let's go have a look. I said, when people are at home, okay, that might lead to some work inefficiencies such as wasted time. And when we have wasted time, that's technically an increased cost to the firm because we could have been using our resources more efficiently during that time. Decrease in supply, decrease in demand. All right, guys, so that's the end of this video. What we did is, just to recap, we had a look at the IGCSE Economics Paper 2, February, March 2024, variant 22. Just remember, in section A, you have to answer all of the questions. You cannot choose in this section. All right. Okay, guys, hope you enjoyed it. Click like, click subscribe, and I'll see you again in the next video. Alrighty. Thanks, guys.